Thank you.
I do want to get back to something that you mentioned earlier about your Martial Club's involvement with uh, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So you mentioned that they reached out to you
Mm-hmm.
on a whim. Talk to us a little bit more about like that process. Obviously,
Yeah.
just the new like what did you feel when you guys first like got that message right from A24, and I'm assuming like the Daniels, right, like searching the world,
Yeah.
to find the right choreography group.
Right. 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 So it was very interesting. When we first got the message, we didn't really know what to make of it. And that's actually a similar story for Andy and his involvement with Shang-Chi. And it actually happened around the same time, within weeks of each other, I think. But if I recall correctly, it started with Daniel Quan reaching out to Brian Lee because he saw a video of MartialClub's. I believe it was Dance of the Drunken Mantis, where Andy Lee and Brian Lee fought each other in a style very reminiscent of Golden Harvest kung fu movies, and it was based on Drunken Master, right? And they saw this and they're like, "Dude, this is exactly what we're looking for our movie. You can't find this in any established film industry anymore." They're like, we got to find these guys. We got to scour Asia and find these guys. So they started like diving into the YouTube and digging into the YouTube channel and digging deeper. And they're like, wait, these guys aren't Asian at all. What? And they kept looking. They're like, these guys are from Orange County. What? And they're like, oh my gosh. So I think they found Brian on Facebook and they messaged him and they're like, um, we're Daniels. We're real. We're actual filmmakers, and we want to explore the possibility of having you guys like work on our movie. And then like we've gotten a couple messages like this up until this point, but a lot of them have been like not really established filmmakers. Like if they ever did produce their films, they'd be like C-level movies on some free streaming platform. But according to what these guys were saying, they were legit filmmakers. And it only took a cursory glance at Google to know that these were the guys who directed the Turn Down for What music video, and they're the guys behind Swiss Army Man, which I had seen the trailer for just months prior. And they're like, "We want to meet with you." And we're like, "Oh snap! Maybe this sounds a little bit different than all the stuff we've run into before, so maybe we should give it a chance." So we met them, and we instantly recognized that we were birds of a feather because we can tell by the way they talked, by the way, by their passion, by their creativity, by the way they created images in your mind. Like they operated on a very similar level that we operated on. And we knew that we found out that they also had an independent filmmaking background on the internet, on Vimeo. And they made skits kind of like the skits we made. And they too were not bound by the conventions of filmmaking, just like we weren't bound by the conventions of martial arts. And they weren't afraid to be told that they were doing it wrong. And they were free to let their imaginations go wherever direction it would take them in. And they would always find a way to execute practically. That was another thing. They didn't believe in this over reliance on CGI or hiding things or doing it the fake way. They wanted to do it the real way because they knew at the end of the day, the audience knows the difference. So instantly, we recognized a lot of kinship in these filmmakers. And so we entertained their ideas. We wanted to hear what they had in mind. And you've seen the movie now. You know how off the wall it is, right?
It is
Imagine
nuts.
hearing the pitch for this movie in words, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. What,
Okay.
what was your interpretation of that? What was your impression of that movie?
So my impression of the movie, it is it's funny because the way that this conversation so far has gone is talking about being held back by limitations, right? And like
Mm,
it's very much going beyond those limitations and having a I
yeah.
can versus I cannot, right? What is possible?
Mhm.
So I felt that it wove in kind of like the typical Asian family trauma story where it's just like
Yeah.
the dad had something against the mom, and then the mom is pushing that down onto her daughter. um, and I
Yeah.
felt very much the whole purpose of the multiverse, right, is possibilities, right? It's really
Yeah.
about overcoming those limitations that you could be anything that you want to be. And so I feel that for
Yeah.
uh, and I guess primarily the audience was primarily Asian American. So, but I think it applies,
Yeah.
overall beyond that. Just like it's very much an American movie of like you can do anything and not be held back by limitations. If I were to distill it into a theme, I would say that I liked that it didn't necessarily focus on like Asian specific tropes. Like it does have obviously the mother daughter kind of relationship, the mother grandfather sort of relationship, and trauma obviously is part of intergenerational trauma is part of the Asian American experience. But
Yeah.
compared to some other movies, right, it's less about like this has to be an Asian narrative, which I think is kind of the direction that I would hope that we head in, at least even for Asian American actors. Like we don't necessarily always have to
Yeah.
do Asian American stories. We can be lead actors in a good story. And so I feel like the
Yeah.
Daniels or like this story, right, really helped elevate that. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Multiple people have said like it was really hard to follow. But it's definitely really off the wall, right? Like a lot of creativity,
Hmm.
but the whole
Hmm.
creation of it is about possibility, and even the making of it, like
Right.
from what it sounds like,
Yeah.
is really about possibility. This is, for Michelle Yeoh, right? Like she's not bound by like an
Right.
Asian oriented script, right? Like she doesn't necessarily have to be the main focus of like I'm an Asian I'm an Asian mom, right? Or like kind of like her role in Crazy Rich Asians. It's like she gets to be, freed, right, from, kind of whatever like whatever typical roles she's had to play in her career. Um, for you
Yeah.
guys, right, it's possibilities of being able to perform a lot of the stuff that you already have done with probably what I imagine is a much bigger budget with more things to play with. And so when I was watching the movie, I'm like,
Yeah.
I have definitely seen that, right? But it's just at a much wider scale or just a higher budget scale from what it
Hmm.
seems like. So yeah, that's kind of what I thought of the
Yeah.
movie. Is just it's distilled in possibility.
Yeah, that was a very astute observation and interpretation of the movie, and very spot on. Because I've seen the movie 3 times, and I think you very succinctly stated a lot of the key messages of the movie. But like you saw the scope of it and
Yeah,
how off the wall it was, how crazy and hard to follow it might be. And imagine that being pitched to us in words,
yeah,
not with visuals, not with writing, but like in words. It's like, okay, it's this world where there's multiple universes and there's these people who know. I won't say too much,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
like people who know how to like take advantage of the fact that it's a multiverse, and like off the wall experiences. And like I said earlier, MartialClub's style of filmmaking is always to weave narrative and action and make it so that they're inseparable, right? So the narrative is being supplied to us.
Right.
Here comes the action, and it's like your narrative is what, butt plugs what, like dildos what, like, and the funny thing was like pretty much day one they mentioned we're gonna have these things. Don't get scared. This is part of the story. Just go with it. And we're like, okay, I mean, I don't know what you're going for here, but all right. And then we just had to like take it on faith that these two mad geniuses knew what they were doing, because like we heard their pedigree, we heard their mindsets, their thought processes, and we just had to trust. You guys know what you're doing, so we're gonna do what you ask for. And we're just gonna trust that we land on the floor with that we land on our feet. And so our confusion continued when they sent us the pitch decks, when they sent us the script. Like imagine reading that movie in script form.
With
Like
just
we were
words.
confused, right? And
Yeah,
like yeah, with just words. And like cuz in a script every scene change, every setting change is its own header with
yeah.
its own thing. So and then you saw scenes where it was just like flashing everywhere.
Right, right, right.
So every one of those flashes was another like heading,
I will
and it
say
made
that
the
they
script
probably
really
needed a
really long.
disclaimer that says like, "Hey, just be warned, there are going to be some flashing lights." So if you have whatever the whole
Yeah.
Caesar, right, like message, I was like, I don't know if they put
Oh
that
yeah, yeah.
necessarily there. Probably should, just in case someone spazzes out. That would be really unfortunate.
This yeah, That's true. I'll see if I can message one of them about that. But yeah, like it was a challenge, and especially that the last fight scene. I won't say too much about it,
Right.
but it was a very non-traditional fight scene. You'll remember, like it is dealing with themes of catharsis and love, themes that you don't necessarily attribute with fight scenes and motivations for people fighting. So having to choreograph that was a real challenge. And the credit to the Daniels is how unbelievably true to the course they stayed. Because like I look at the finished product and I remember reading back in the script, I'm like, yeah, that's what they said they were going to do. I had no idea how they were going to execute this, but they did it. And I'm like pinkies. Who would have
Yeah.
thought you could illustrate that with pinkies? And I'm like, whoa, like no, yeah, that's what it looked like. And the process of taking Martial Club ideas and putting it into a feature film like this was an interesting one. And like ultimately, we're very very pleased to see our ideas splashed up in there for the world to see. It's an amazing feeling, and that's kind of the warmth we felt at every single screening we've been to, where like people are cheering, erupting into applause every
Right.
single fight scene, and it just made us feel so fulfilled. But at the same time, what you see on the stage, what you see on the screen, isn't 100% like what we originally imagined. We imagined bigger. You know, Martial Club style is maximal, just like Daniel's style is maximal, but they have to meet somewhere in between. So we would choreograph 6 minutes, and 2 minutes would make it into the final cut. That's a very normal thing. Um, and when the movie hits its wide release and everything is declassified, we very much intend on showing the world what we originally had in mind. And, maybe people will agree that the final cut encapsulates everything Daniels wanted to say better. But we look forward to the idea that people can see like everything we had cooking.
I think when I was in the premiere,
In
they
another
had,
universe, this is how it might have been.
yeah. In the premiere, I think at the end of the premiere, I think he was there, and there, I think he mentioned something that for the one scene with like there where he has a rope, right, and he's doing like the whole
Yeah,
rope and I wouldn't say spear thing, but it's just like it's a
yeah,
heavy object, right? Like you've seen it in martial arts movies. He's just saying
yeah,
that like they only had so many shoots, right, to do that, and like
yeah,
they were very he was very limited in terms of the number of times that he could do it.
yeah,
So he's like really hoping like,
yeah,
all right, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one. And I think he said like on his second or third try, like or second was it their second, third, or second to third to last. I think it was second try that he said that he actually got it. He was like it was a sigh of relief, I think for him. So I thought that was something that was interesting, but talk to me a little bit about, you guys all do your stuff. Like in Martial Club, you guys do all the stunts. You guys are used to all the martial arts stuff.
hmm hmm
So when working with people, that may not necessarily have like a humongous history, right, of martial arts, right? Like, talk to me a little bit about like that challenge and like, I mean, I guess part of it
yeah,
goes into integrating styles, but just kind of what we're talking about earlier about how do you get the most bang for your buck for maybe people who don't have martial
right,
arts or dance experience or can't necessarily do a lot of like the acrobatic type things but still
right.
create a meaningful action scene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. First of all credit to Key. He definitely put in his work, and he definitely achieved something that's not easy to achieve. That choreography isn't designed for a normal person,
Yeah.
like that's Jackie Chan level choreography. And Key has martial arts training, but he's not that kind of actor. So he definitely had to go outside of his world to incorporate all of that. And we do kind of have to temper it for the performer, because we had to design it knowing that it wasn't going to be us performing it. And even I, like all of us, have moments where like we're doing a really difficult bit of choreography and our mind just isn't functioning on the day of, and
Right.
you keep missing a beat here and causing the director to call cut. Like for example, from my experience, when we were filming our Yip Man short film a couple years ago, there was one exchange we did that was 30 beats long. Like, to put it into perspective, the average fight scene in a Hollywood movie, in one take, it's maybe one beat, 1.5 beats. We did one take, 30 beats. And you
What
have to
is a
remember
beat
30
like?
movements, 30
Oh,
distinct
is a
movements.
beat a movement?
Okay, Yeah, so essentially yes. So when you do, like, say in a fight, in a, like, you're watching a fight and they go 1 2 3,
Yeah,
so the beat is 1 2 3, there's
got it.
three
Okay,
beats, right?
okay,
If you watch most kung fu or watch most Hollywood action movies now, every time they do a fight scene, it's literally a beat, cut,
right,
and then you see this person react, and then a beat, cut, you see the person react, and it's a very disjointed feeling, and based on how you shoot it, it can be very jarring, because, like, the person's watching, and it's not like they know ahead of time what they're going to see, so they kind of have to form a geography of this 2D space that's happening in the movie in front of them, and they kind of have to mentally keep track of this world that they're being shown different glimpses of. So if you shoot it in a very disjointed way, all it just looks like is,
right,
it just looks like punches coming from different directions, and it's very confusing. But then in kung fu movies, they have like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and it's all like in one. It's all in one shot, so you kind of have a sense of where things are progressing. And when they cut, it's simply to show you a better angle of the continuation of this action. So that's called legibility. You want the action to be legible.
right,
Anyways, all that being said is, like, as opposed to one beat in one cut, you have to do like 8 beats in one cut. It's 8 times more choreography that you have to remember at any given time. So Key, especially when he did that first section of choreography, he had to remember a lot, and he's got to get it right. He's got to get the rhythm right. He's got to hit hit the right marks, and yeah, I think it did have to be pared down a little bit, but comparatively, like relatively speaking, he was able to carry. Like, I would say the spirit of the original previs and what ended up on the screen is, it's very similar. He did a really good job, and of course, stunt people come into play on certain things, but a lot of that was him. Like, the heart and soul of that was him, and he accomplished a lot.
got it. Talk to me a little bit about uh, your approach to the fight choreo, right? Like the spirit of it. Not to necessarily get into any details, but like, when the Daniels pitch you this movie, it's going to be multiverse, right? A lot of possibilities. Like in your guys' mind, as you guys are whatever uh, talking about how we should approach this, like is there like a sense of like what is kind of like the one value that you wanted to like make sure that resonated across the choreo, right? Just because like when you guys do your martial
Hmm.
club stuff, right, that pays homage obviously to hard work, discipline, right, the things that you mentioned before, but obviously someone's providing a different narrative to you. So how did you incorporate, I guess, that piece of the narrative, or not narrative, but the spirit of the narrative into
Mm-hmm.
the fight choreo?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's actually a much more complex question than one might realize, because it comes from a lot of slightly intangible things. Like, the answer lies in a lot of intangible explanations. But I'll say this: on one level, like you said, it's a movie about, it's an Asian family drama, and with it comes a certain Asian familiarity and Asian sensibility, and that you see that in the fight scenes. This is very much in Hong Kong pedigree, right? This is in the tradition and the vein of martial arts filmmaking from Hong Kong,
Okay.
and it's a movie about some people who come from Hong Kong, some people who come from China. And that being said, it's the tradition of that is, you can tell that it's the actual performer performing the moves. And that comes from the legibility of the action. You see their face, you see extended bits of choreography. Of course, there are stunt doubles here and there, but even in Hong Kong, there were stunt doubles. But the idea is, you're not using CG to hide anything from the actors. You're not using you're not using like cheat cuts and quick cuts to hide any lack of skill. The skill is there. So, like, it's in the choreography, it's in the performance of the actors, it's in the performance of the stunt doubles. So there's that. Also, it's the flavor, you know, the flavor that goes to enhance the theme of the movie. We're talking about people one generation removed from the motherland, 2 generations removed from the motherland, and with it comes all of the cultural sensibilities, not just in the circumstances of the story. It's also in the way they move. It's in the way they speak. It's in the way they act. It's in the way they fight. So there's that. Um, and then, that being said, like we trusted that the aesthetic that Daniels wanted was Hong Kong aesthetic. So
Got it.
we drew from like the most notable things from kung fu movies. And we knew that even though the story is drastically different than the stories being told in Shaw Brothers era and Golden Harvest era, it's going to fit because this is according to the director's vision. So it kind of like boils down somewhere in between those.
I think it makes sense, right? Like given their background as an independent filmmaker, they wanted you
Hmm.
guys for that sort of Hong Kong film aesthetic. So I can see
Yeah,
where the lines are, like why, or I guess how you guys infused your style relative to what they wanted was because that's the reason why they wanted you
yeah,
guys, was specifically for a specific style. And it just seems like
yeah,
maybe it was more now, hey, you have additional props, right? Like normally I would say your stuff is not
yeah,
necessarily in an office setting, right? So I would imagine that the props just gave you more to play with that are already based in like kind of what you guys already do.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So
I want to move on kind of to like some of your experience working with like the actors on set for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Just overall
mhm.
holistically, like working with rising stars, established names. Like, what did you guys take away from working with different types of Asian American actors and just being in a creative space with them?
Yeah. Okay, I'll start by I'll preface by saying my involvement with the film was mostly in the pre-production part of it. So Martial Club Stunt Family worked on the pre-visual, so we choreographed a lot of the action before principal photography began. So as far as like actors in the actual cut, it was mostly Andy and Brian as well as DY and our friend Julio. So I didn't actually get to work with a lot of the principal cast, but a lot of them did. And we designed the action knowing that this would be packaged for them. So like for example, I did a lot of the pre-visual that Michelle would be basing her choreography off of. She'd be
Got it.
watching a video of me to learn what she needs to do. But I never had a lot of like face-to-face working with her and teaching her that. But Andy and Brian did. So what was interesting about it is this movie represents several generations of Asian actors, right? You got James Hong, who's
Right.
93 years old right now,
Dang, I did
and
not
still
know he was
talks really, really
93.
clearly.
He looks great for 93.
He's 93 years old, and what's crazy is that he drives himself to the premiere, he and his wife, and he's wearing a leather jacket. His hair is all black and nice, and I'm really impressed. I hope I can look anywhere close to that if I ever get to 93. But he's just full of life, you know. And he's a veteran in Hollywood acting. He's been
Right.
in movies 50 years ago, you know, like we've seen, you know. And then Key he was just a kid in The Goonies and Indiana Jones, so he was like in the 80s, and he's always been in the film world, but less so in front of the camera in recent years. And now he's kind of making his return to acting. And then you've got Michelle, who's also been around for that long, and then you have Stephanie Shu, who's a newer actor. She's younger, but like all they represent different eras in acting and different levels of the Asian American experience, right? Like some of them, like Michelle, is she's had her start in Hong Kong, and she's been working around the world, and it seems like she's just getting more and more traction here in the U.S. in recent years. And Key represents a different time in that 80s adventure style movie, and James Hong represents like the that like off the wall like Little Trouble, you know,
Yeah.
Big Trouble in Little China kind of thing. Like so, they represent different eras and understandings of what Asians can be in Hollywood, and therefore a different set of sensibilities when it comes to teaching them choreography, right?
Sure, sure.
Because Michelle has been in martial arts movies since before we were born, and she's naturally really good at it, even if she is 59 years old. She's like she just picks it up like that. Whereas like a Stephanie has to be taught all of this. Like she has her background in other things, in dance and all of that, but like martial arts is a new arena for her, and just like having to cater to different experience levels, different ages, different like cultural understandings of what it is you're showing them. It was an interesting challenge because like it's on the fight choreographers and the teachers and the trainers to be flexible.
I
And
mean,
at the end of the day, the movie needs to be made. It's got to
it
look
just
good.
sounds like you're giving, private martial arts lessons to, this is like your dojo, or like
Basically,
essentially, or
yeah, but
you
it's like
just have a bunch of
very
teachers.
expedited.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
very expedited, and millions of dollars are at stake. So no pressure.
that's true. But at least I would hope that they're willing listeners.
Yeah, I think given the finished result, I'd say that they were.